I wanted to share with you, this message has been kind of not a long time coming, that doesn't make sense, but it's been taking time to put together. And I just wanted to share with you something that I wrote down in a journal as I was praying. And there's a thought that really passed through my mind that I'm like, I have to write this down, but then I realized, I need to include this into this message. I think it's fitting. I said, Lord, I'm afraid I'm seeking what I'll get out of this relationship with you instead of sacrificing myself for the sake of your grace. In preparing my mind for this message, I was taken back to the story of Julius Caesar and Brutus. Julius Caesar being the ruler of Rome, and Brutus actually had a close relationship. You would say that while Brutus wasn't right up there with Julius Caesar, they had a close relationship. But that relationship soured when Julius Caesar decided to designate himself as like a dictator, and then he gave him divine status. So he set him up as far above any other man. So that bothered Brutus, but the interesting thing with that is you'd think that would be a noble cause of anger, But then when Brutus kills him, and then time goes on, you find out, he had other motivations at play. Here's someone who is, in essence, in the king's inner circle, but because of the fact that he went ahead and killed Julius Caesar, you get a sense that, it looks like he's doing the nation a favor, getting rid of a dictator and getting rid of someone who's set him up as divine. You also get a sense of the fact that he then tried to invade and he tried to take over rule later on. You get a sense, he was in this inner circle looking for a better position down the road at some point in time. And it really brings up a question of true motives. And I think when you look then in the Bible, and you look at James and John, they came to Jesus and they asked, can we sit at your left and right hand? And Jesus' response to them is like, you don't know what you're asking. You start getting a glimpse, a window into true motivations. But let's contrast that to another story. Look in 2 Samuel 23. We're going to talk about David's mighty men. In 2 Samuel 23, it says, David longed for water, like I do right now, and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the 3 mighty men broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, O Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. Consider for a moment the focus of David's mighty men. Read about these guys. These guys were incredible. And they were in David's inner circle. But consider their focus. David wanted a cup of water, and they're surrounded by the enemy. But these 3 men were concerned about serving their king. They didn't care about their lives. They didn't care about anything else. Their whole focus was, my king asked for a cup of water. Let's go get it. It's kind of fitting to dovetail that to a story of, it's called the David community. It was a monastic community that once existed in Wales in the 5th and 6th centuries. If you wanted to be a part of this monastic community, when you'd get to the gates and you'd knock on the door of the gate, no one would answer. You keep knocking, no one would answer. Day goes by, no answer. 2 days goes by, no answer. 3 days goes by, no answer. If you were still there after 10 days, then they would open the door. When you were led in, you weren't brought into the brethren. You stayed at the gate, and you worked with the person who watched over the gate. And you stayed there. You learned from that person for months, years, until you demonstrated that you weren't going anywhere, that it was for you, that you were all in. Then once they judged that you were all in, that you were going to be reliable, that you were totally committed to how they lived their lives, then you were invited in to be a part of the brethren. So that brings an important question. Where would we be after 10 days? If we had to knock on the gates into heaven, would we still be there after 10 days? Do we see our service to the Messiah with such hunger that we'll endure just to be allowed in? Think about Peter's denial of Jesus. Oh, I'll be right there. I'm never going to deny you. I'm going to be right there beside you. I'm going to be right there beside you. As soon as he's arrested, whoa, I have no idea who this guy is. He was looking forward to an earthly kingdom, and he knew this person personally. He was looking forward to what kind of seat he's going to have at the table. Then when it got real, he was nowhere to be found. And it brings up the real question. Do you love me? In Haggai 1, we have this account. Now, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build a house, so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home I blew away. Why? Declares the Lord Almighty. Because of my house, which remains a ruin while each of you is busy with his own house. Therefore, because of you, the heavens have withheld their dew and the earth its crops. I called for a drought on the fields and the mountains, on the grain, the new wine, the oil, and whatever the ground produces, on men and cattle, and on the labor of your hands. Notice, again, you've planted, but you have harvested little. You drink, but you never have your fill. You put on clothes, but you're not warm. Why? Asks the Lord. Because my house, it remains a ruin. They had started building the house. They had started to build the walls. They started rebuilding after they came back from exile. But, you kind of want to, shelter to live in and a house to keep the weather out. But their focus started shifting to their houses instead of the house for the Lord. Therefore, because of that, the Lord withheld the dew and the earth its crops. In Matthew 6, it says, Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where the thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And 1 John 2. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. But this brings up a question. What are we looking forward to? We're looking forward to heaven. But what vision of heaven are we looking forward to? Psalm 84:10 says, "Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked." Better is one day. I would rather be a doorkeeper. Do we really believe that? Going back to the David community, would we be happy being at the door? Would we be there after 10 days? Would we be merely happy and overjoyed by the fact that we were let in? Revelation 4, 6 through 8 says, "Also before the throne there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. In the center, around the throne, were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes, in front and in back. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under his wings. Day and night they never stopped saying, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.'" Who of us can honestly say that better would be eternity standing around the throne every moment, declaring, "Holy, holy, holy"? I listened to a prominent pastor who I think, if I remember correctly, has fallen actually away, or his doctrine's fallen off. And I remember years ago him talking about the fact that he looked forward to heaven because he gets to play golf every day. What vision of heaven are you looking for? Is Jesus' sacrifice enough that we would give up this life, everything of this life, our vision and our idea of heaven? Was this sacrifice enough that we're willing to give that all up just to be a doorkeeper? Or to stand around his throne for all eternity just to declare, "Holy, holy, holy"? I think we need to honestly think about this for a moment, especially living in the United States, because we have many, many blessings, and it makes it very, very difficult to want to leave sometimes. We'll look around at the good things that we have, and we're looking forward to heaven being a continuation of what we have here, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But we have to keep in mind, are we creating our vision of heaven, or are we so thankful for the sacrifice of Christ that we're even allowed in, no matter what that looks like, no matter what we'll be doing, just so I can be at your throne, declaring, "Holy, holy, holy"? Is that our main concern? See, my concern, and what should be our concern, is that we cannot be in love with the world, and that includes our own idea of what heaven's going to be, as though we're soon going to be in our kingdom. For if we do, if there's any hesitation, there's any consideration of what we'll miss, what it will be for us, you got to think of it this way. Then we won't always be ready to obey our king. David's mighty men didn't care about the positions that they were going to get. Their joy, their sense of fulfillment and purpose was serving their king. And again, read the exploits of these men. I mean, to stand firm in a bean field and fight off the enemy, this is where I'm at. Service to their king was of utmost importance to them. Not what seat they're going to have at the table. They gave up the concerns, and as you see in the case of just getting a cup of water, they were willing to give up their lives to get their king a cup of water. We have a really good life. Compared to the rest of the world, we have a really good life in this country. Are we willing to give that up to get our king a cup of water? See, we can get it wrong looking forward to our idea of heaven instead of learning here and now that we're here to serve our king's kingdom. This impacts our obedience. And again, it comes back to the question, do you love me? Where is your treasure? So what's the application of all this? The question holds the application. It's found in the simple, non-calculating devotion of David's mighty men. Do we love our king so much we'd sacrifice, as Jesus did, our thoughts, hopes, comforts, our own home, to fight the enemy to retrieve a cup of water? I mentioned at the beginning, talking about James and John coming to Jesus and asking, can we sit at your left and right hands? And Jesus responded to them, well, I'll get to it here. Mark 10. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want to... First of all, let me stop there. They addressed him as teacher, so they're already not comprehending what they're going to ask because they're addressing him merely as teacher. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Now, there's the other problem. They have their vision, their idea of what kind of glory they're looking for. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right hand and the other at your left in your glory. You do not know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? Recall David's longing for a cup of water. But now think of the flippant attitude of James and John here. Notice the parallels here, talking about cups of water. Were they ready to fight an enemy to get their king a cup of water? Or were they looking forward to their own idea of glory? Were they looking for their own kingdom, their own vision of what their lives are going to be, the benefit that they're going to have? And you follow that up with, well, where were they when their king was going through the trial and crucifixion? They were nowhere to be found. So that answers their question. No, they weren't ready to go get that cup of water for their king. They were looking forward to their own idea of their glory, what they were going to be, the benefits that they were going to get out of the friendship with Jesus, their teacher. But then look at what happened. Look at what happened in their lives. After Christ's death and then his resurrection, They no longer focused on what they were going to get out of their relationship being a follower of Jesus. It became about serving their king. James was executed by Herod. John, he was exiled. He was imprisoned a number of times. Now, granted, he didn't suffer the kinds of deaths that his fellow disciples did, but he suffered as well. Many have said that he was more tactful than the other disciples, and that's what maybe saved his life. So imagine if he was a little bit more loose with his tongue, he probably would have suffered the same as what the other disciples did. But notice the change, the difference. They saw what their king went through, and they came to understand sacrifice. They came to understand the cost of their own sin. Better was one day just to be a doorkeeper. Whatever, I don't care. Just let me in. And they go from asking Jesus to sit at his left and right hand to say, forget that. Here's my life. And they paid for it. They only cared about being a doorkeeper. They weren't asking for those seats to the left and the right anymore. They just wanted in. They weren't worrying about their seat near some king. Speaking of kings, I think it's helpful, we're approaching Independence Day, I think it's helpful to kind of recall the foundations of the United States and the fact, and particularly the fact that it's been called throughout history the American experiment. Why is that? Well, really, until the Lord allowed the United States to come into existence and helped establish this nation, you have centuries, you have thousands of years of what? Nothing but dictators, monarchs, and class rule. You don't have this sense of God creating, first of all, and nor creating people equal. You have a class system all throughout history. So this was an experiment. Can man self-rule? But that's a little misleading, because what the Lord, I believe, was really doing with this nation wasn't can man self-rule, is we depose the king to have his place taken by the King of Kings. That was the purpose. Acts 17:26 says, "From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live." Daniel 2:21 says, "He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them." So if we believe that it's the Lord that establishes and tears down nations, then we have to look at this nation as set up by the Lord. But for what purpose? He deposes a king so that we can open the door for the King of Kings. That we wouldn't be self-ruled, we would be ruled by the most benevolent king ever known in mankind's history. It's an opportunity that we have to serve our King. See his will done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, even though I've been talking about the fact that, kind of bringing up the question of what heaven are we looking forward to? Are we looking forward to our own ideas, or are we truly looking towards the Lord's? It isn't to be negative that heaven won't be a wonderful place. It's going to blow our minds for sure. The idea is let's let the Lord, create it, and let him rule over it, and let's just enjoy it. It's not the fact that the Lord doesn't give us the desires of our heart, or He doesn't want it to be a wonderful place or a good place to want to be for all eternity. It isn't that, but we have to be careful. Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart," which is great. But we have to be careful, because Romans 1:24 says, "Therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies one with one another." So what desire of your heart are you looking for? Are we delighting in the Lord's heart, or is it our fallen nature heart that we're looking forward to? And that's the temptation that we have living in this world, is we have so many good things, but we have a number of evil things around us. So what are we looking forward to? The Lord will give us the desires of the heart. He'll either, if we're that wicked, all right, I'll give you over to that, if that's what you want. Or we can delight ourselves in Him, meaning, you know what? I don't care what heaven looks like. As long as you're the one ruling and reigning over it, and it's your place, I just want to be there. I'll leave it to you. I'll have faith and trust in you that it'll be all right. That I'll let go of my plans and my purposes. So we have to be careful of what desires of our hearts we're truly seeking. Because, as I read earlier, if the love of the world is in us, then we're not in love with the Father. You can't have a foot in one and a foot in the other. You have to be all in one and all out of the other. What are you looking forward to? We have our ideas of heaven, but we need to make sure that we delight ourselves in Him above all of those. Just so I can be in your presence. I know that they were created beings, specifically created, as we read in Revelation. It was their role to surround the throne and to be there for all eternity, 24/7, even though time will dissolve and everything will be different. 24/7, they're there surrounding the throne, saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." That should be our desire. Because of what Christ did. Is that enough? Is that sacrifice enough that we don't care? We just want to be there. We want to throw off this world to just be there with Him. That's what you see with James and John. Oh, I just want to let us sit at your left and right hand. Then when they got clued in, I give you my life, I don't care. You see that with Peter. You really see that with Peter. He was on the outside looking in. And Jesus 3 times addressed the issue. Do you love me? Or are you looking forward to your idea of heaven? See, you can have a vision, desires of your heart. You can have your own vision of heaven, and we see that. I mean, some are believing there's going to be a bunch of virgins waiting for them in their version of heaven. We're to trust the Lord with His version of heaven, what it's going to be. And you see that with Peter. He's on the outside looking in, and Jesus addresses the real issue. Do you love me? Is my saving you from your sin, that you will not have an eternal death, everything for you that you don't care about your life and that you'll give it up. Every vision of any kind of promotion, any opportunity that you think that you're going to have, are you willing to give that up just so you can be saved? And each time you see when he confronted Peter about that, he gave him a sense of how he had to sacrifice. Feed my sheep, serve them, care for them. There was no sense of, you're going to get a big mansion in the sky, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. It was all serve, 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 sacrifice. Give your life, give your life, give your life. Why? Because that's what Jesus did. And if our King is doing that, why can he not expect that from us? So we have to answer the question, why am I here? I believe it is found, going back to this scriptures from in Haggai. You're throwing off earthly kings, but you're seeking first the king's righteousness, trusting him with the gift of heaven. You're giving back to God the authority he's due. This was the reason for their exile in the first place. They were serving their king, they were serving their God, but then they got comfortable. Then they became flippant, expectant that the Lord would forgive them, that the Lord will just look past every sin, that they can just live however they wanted to live. And the Lord kept warning them, using the prophets. Hey, you need to get right with me. It's not about your comfort. It's not about what you want. It's about serving. It's about my authority, my rule and reign on this earth. But they were too busy looking for their own kingdom, setting up their own. And so they formed some unhealthy alliances, fell into some real bad kings and leaders, and ends up leading them into exile. When the Lord opens the door, gives the decree to allow them to come back, what's the first thing they're to be doing? Rebuilding the Lord's house. In other words, rebuilding his rule and reign over the people. They start out, and they get so far, but then they get comfortable looking and building their own little kingdoms, their own homes, their own kingdoms within God's kingdom, and they neglect building the Lord's house. So they neglect the authority of the king. They neglect the authority of God. Hence, why they never had enough. They were never fulfilled. They were always lacking. Because they were building their own little kingdoms. They were not investing, building his temple. And we need to be careful that we aren't investing and building in our own comforts. That we aren't becoming comfortable. There's a difference between being content and being comfortable. We are to be content in this life, looking forward to what we're going to have in God's presence. The problem is the temptation, especially here in this nation, is to get comfortable. Building our own kingdom. Building our own house at the neglecting of building the Lord's house, which is the Great Commission, going to your workplace. It could be going to a whole other nation where the standard of living is entirely different. But it could be one of those moments where when you make that sacrifice, you draw that little bit closer to the Lord than you had before. And you have a closeness of relationship to the Lord that you didn't have before because you're throwing off the things that you were holding that kept you that were in the way of that relationship with the Lord. Where is our treasure? It's kind of fun that the way this worked out. I think when Pastor comes back, he will actually be talking about heaven, talking about what heaven will be like. So I get to be the bad cop, he gets to be the good cop. But I think it's important that we look at it now before we're presented with what heaven is going to be. And I think that's why there's a bit of vagueness over what heaven is really going to be, because it is a matter of faith. This whole life is a matter of being tested in our faith. Are we going to trust in our Lord, or are we going to lean on ourselves? And that's a major temptation that we have. Do we have it so well, so good, that when the Lord speaks to us, maybe a reason why we're not obeying, maybe the reason why we're not seeing answers to prayer is because we're not going. Because we're too comfortable. We have it too good. We've made our heaven here. You know, this wouldn't be too bad to continue. I think it's interesting, though. There's always wars and rumors of wars, no matter how good you have it. And while they're terrible, absolutely terrible and atrocious, I mean, look at the 20th century, the bloodiest century ever known to man. I can't help but think that the Lord's not standing back there saying, yeah, see, give it up. You think it's good. And think of the advantages. I mean, think of how much technologically we advanced in the 20th century compared to prior centuries prior to that. It was amazing. I mean, we go from, if you wanted to fly, you had to be able to jump real high, to being able to cross oceans. And yet, it was the bloodiest century that we've ever seen. So is it really that good? But if we get comfortable in this life, if we hold on to it too much, we won't be willing to go. And that translates even before we face the Lord at our death. That comes with just being willing to go when he's asking us to serve him here and now, as we still draw breath, as our hearts still beat. So where is our treasure? Let me end with this, and it's just going back to what I've been sharing, going back to David's mighty men. And I want to do this with Father's Day, and I want to do this pretty well with everybody, but I want to start with the men, us men, and I don't care how old you are, because at some point in time you're going to be a father. You're either going to have your own family and you're going to be a father, or you're going to be a spiritual father. Our King thirsts and is distraught over the state of the world. Our King is suffering right now. There are too many that don't know him, that he died for. Our King is distraught. Our King is thirsting. Are we willing to get up, sacrifice our lives to go get our King a cup of water? And it's the same, but slightly different for the ladies. Are you willing to stand beside and maybe even at times behind the men, to allow them to lead on, to encourage them to get up and let's go? I'm in this with you. Let's go do this. Let's give it our all. Let's give everything that we have to go get our King the cup of water that he's longing. The sacrifice that he's looking for.